To go to war, but why should we follow Logan's kin?
You can trust me. You have my word.
We don't.
Hey parents, Carmine here with your video review of Fable 3.
Ain't that right, Boulder?
Then what do you want?
Proof.
Fable 3 is a sweet, fairy tale-like game that puts players in a storybook world where they have to fight off evil and win the day. The game is completely appropriate for children of all ages. Or so you'd think at first glance, but this is unfortunately not the case. Fable 3 would be appropriate for children of all ages if it weren't for a few somewhat well-hidden elements. Fable 3 presents an interesting but dark story. Players will be initially tasked with trying to overthrow the main character's brother, who is the current king, by organizing an army large enough to fulfill the hero's destiny to rule the kingdom. Along the way, the player will have to make some serious decisions with grave consequences. For example, within a few minutes of starting the game, players will be forced to decide whether the king should kill a small group of innocent protesters or the player's significant other.
Choose me. You can't let them all die. Choose me.
The violence in Fable 3 is very mild. Players will either use melee weapons, ranged weapons, or magic to kill enemies, but there is no gore. There is some blood and a slightly greater level of violence when the player performs executions, which can happen fairly regularly, but even these were nothing compared to other similar games. The true mature content comes later on. Players are able to have sex with almost any character in Fable 3. If the player manages to get someone to like them enough, there's a very likely chance that the player can take that person to bed. Sex only shows a black screen, but the sounds heard in the background are interesting, to say the least. Players can also get married in Fable 3 multiple times. Fable 3 allows for polygamy. As long as the player keeps his multiple spouses in different cities, there will never be any serious consequences. Players can get married again and again and again. Fable 3 also includes the options for protected and unprotected sex. Players can find and buy condoms in various different stores. If the player has unprotected sex with someone, there's a chance that the player will contract an STD. STDs have almost zero effect on the player though, so there's almost no reason to go through the time and expense to find condoms. Another product of unprotected sex with a spouse is children. Players can have children with any spouse of the opposite gender. If the player marries a spouse of the same gender, the couple can adopt, unless the player chose to replace the orphanage with a brothel, in which case the player will be able to have group sex with any number of prostitutes. Just another one of the many serious choices the game has the player make. Compared to the sexuality, substance use is very mild. Players are able to buy and use potions, but there isn't much point since most players will receive very little damage in combat. However, players are able to buy and drink alcoholic beverages such as beer. If the player drinks too much, the screen will become bubbly to indicate that the player is drunk. After a short period of time, the player will vomit, and everything will return to normal soon afterward. Due primarily to the surprising level of sexuality and substance use, we gave this game a recommended age of 14 years old. For the full written review, including the extra categories, log on to SideStoryGames.com.